this lesson, I'd like to show you how to improvise over the chord changes to one of my compositions called Downtown from my album Synergy. There are 4 chords in this chord progression, and they are all over an F sharp bass pedal. So the bass plays F sharp the entire time, and the harmonies change over the F sharp bass note. So here's your first chord. I will spell it out with individual notes so you can hear it. Here's your next chord. Your next chord. And your final chord. Everything's over an F sharp bass, and your first chord is essentially 9, 5, 7, 1. So it's an Ionian sound. So you'll play F sharp Ionian over that chord. Now your next chord is a D triad over a G, and you can think of that as a G add 9. But over the F sharp bass, in this moment of the progression, it really sounds like a Lydian sound. So the F sharp bass is kind of the Phrygian bass note, and this is a Lydian chord on top of it. So you can think of it as either of those modes. This next chord is like a major 7, but you have the 4th in there as well, so it's an Ionian sound. It's a major chord with a 4, and over the F sharp bass, it really just sounds like the 7th is in the bass. And your last chord in the progression is this chord. It's a very unusual chord. This is actually a chord that I just found on the guitar. I never learned it from transcribing it or anything like that. I just found it on the guitar and I liked it. And I had a difficult time analyzing this for a long time until I started thinking about it in terms of a symmetrical scale. And I found that this chord is in one of the Messiaen modes, the mode 3. And on this website I call it the 9-note symmetrical, but the Messiaen mode 3 supports this chord. So if you play that on B, this chord, this scale will essentially fit together. Your first step is just to simply play the scales along with the chords. So start with your first chord, play an F sharp major scale. Okay, then your G Lydian. Then your G Ionian, that 4th. Then your mode 3. Nine-note symmetrical on B. some variations that I use over these chords to create some variety. So over this F sharp, sometimes I use a minor pentatonic, an A sharp minor pentatonic, or a B flat, if you will. Okay, and over the G, I just move it up a half step to the B minor pentatonic. And over the next chord, I stay on the B minor pentatonic. Okay, then on this chord, sometimes I like to think of this whole sound as just a big dominant going back to the F sharp. So I'll think of it as a C sharp 7 chord. And I will think of it as half whole diminished. It's close. You have a note in there that does not work with the chord, but that's a nice sound, and actually when you play the lines quickly, it can work beautifully over that chord. Find that sometimes when I'm working on challenging sets of chord changes, if I look at the changes in a slightly different way, I think about a different scale or a substitution or a different mode. If I think about it in a different way, that will often lead to me playing slightly different lines or hearing different ideas or using different vocabulary. In the first section, we said that we're going to think of this as F sharp Ionian, G Lydian, G Ionian, then starting on B, thinking of the 9-note symmetrical scale. Now let's change it up and think of this entire piece as an F sharp pedal, and let's think of it modally that way. Thinking of this as an F sharp pedal, let's go through the scales. So here is F sharp Ionian. Okay, then F sharp Phrygian. Then your F sharp Locrian. Then your symmetrical scale starting on F sharp. Now, this fingering will be a great fingering for that, where you basically take your first finger, your second finger, and your fourth. Okay, and you play this pattern, and then you move this up in major thirds. So you can achieve the scale again by playing your your first finger, your second finger, and your fourth finger within a position. And when you play this symmetrically across the fretboard in major thirds, you'll achieve the scale. And one tip about this is that anytime you're on one of the strings, like for example the fourth string, you can just start again on the next note. So you can move this around the fretboard like this, watch. Maybe I'll stay on this string. So you can play this by thinking about this shape. You can just continue the shape every major third. So you can go to another string or stay on the same string. So you can get all over the fretboard if you think about it in that simple way. Another way that I think of this tune, and this was one of my favorite ways, is to convert everything to Dorian except for the last chord, which we will convert to melodic minor. So a lot of times converting complex changes that fall within the major scale to Dorian is a very nice way for guitar players to navigate changes. And this tune is no different. So what we can do is we can think of each of the chords as the Dorian within that key. So if we're on, for example, F sharp Ionian, okay, you can think of that as a G sharp Dorian or an A flat Dorian. So if we are thinking the G Lydian, okay, we can think of that as an E Dorian. Then the G major, we can think of that as an A Dorian. And on this last chord, like I said in the last lesson, sometimes I just think of this as a C sharp 7. And if we want to keep it similar to Dorian, let's make a melodic minor and make it D melodic minor. So C sharp 7 altered basically becomes D melodic minor. So our scales for this can be A flat or G sharp Dorian, then E Dorian, A Dorian, D melodic minor. So here's an example of thinking that way. So here's A flat Dorian, E Dorian, A Dorian, D melodic minor. The idea of these two lessons is to show you that by thinking in slightly different ways about the chord changes, you can access different parts of your vocabulary and different parts of your fretboard knowledge. So if you have some versatility in terms of thinking, that will often give you versatility in terms of vocabulary and lines.